Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing fine, thank you. Want to go back to Syria again because some things are stirring. But before we talk about Syria and the re-escalation and our sort of a flip-flopping foreign policy we have, but that's not news. But it looks like there's a greater danger building there, and that's been around for a while. But before we start on that, I want to just make a short comment about the elections, because that was big.
Yeah, Super Tuesday.
And people were sort of really impressed that Biden, was down, and now he's up and he's flying high, and he got the endorsement, and even he got Bloomberg's endorsement.
Yeah.
And did so much better. One thing that was sort of neat last night was two billionaires didn't do well. So in that sense, just money isn't the whole thing. But somebody said, well, you have to have a good presentation on TV, and they said, well, Biden isn't the greatest, for that. But the markets reacted very favorably because it looked like that Sanders was knocked down a bit, which would be good if we're less enthusiastic about socialism, and he's the symbol of socialism, and the markets have gone up. But I just wonder whether this sigh of relief is worth a whole lot, because there might not be a whole lot of difference. Because if you take Sanders, he could be slightly better on foreign policy than Biden. At the same time, if he's extremely bad on socialism and the spending, maybe the Congress will resist him. And Biden is, in that sense, could be a sleeper. He could be more hawkish, and there won't be as much resistance. And the people are happy with that. But the markets aren't the ultimate end, because just the other day the market skyrocketed when the Fed lowered their interest rates by 50 basis points. That lasted for a day.
Yeah.
But the markets are up today, and but I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of difference. They're all authoritarians, and Biden supports, and what I'm saying is maybe he's more likely to get some of this stuff passed than Sanders, because Sanders is stereotyped and most people are aware of him.
Yeah, I think despite the scare tactics, you make a good point that ironically Sanders may be better for those of us concerned about this out-of-control spending and out-of-control militarism, because I think his military budgets would be smaller than Biden's. I think he would be less inclined to use the military overseas. And if he tries to do a bunch of big stuff domestically, the Republicans may actually even wake up a little bit and start resisting. But with Biden going through there, he's going to spend more on war. He's going to spend more at home. No one's going to say boo. But
let's be very clear on this. If we would happen to be voting in the Democratic primary, we wouldn't be voting for Sanders. But these points, I think, are important.
If I could vote for Tulsi, I would. If I had to do between Biden and Sanders, I'd probably go for Sanders.
Yeah, she may qualify for the next debate.
No, they'll change the rules. Don't worry.
They'll change it before they allow her to do that. But let's talk a little bit about Syria. It's been around for a bit. And there was talk about giving missiles to Turkey, the Patriot missiles, and then there was an argument between the State Department and the Pentagon. The Pentagon seemed to be a little bit more commonsensical about, hey, let's not do this in a hurry. But the State Department is more, I guess, with the neocon position.
Yeah,
and so they're back at it now. And Trump let a lot of people believe we're moving out, we're taking troops out, and we don't want to escalate, we don't want to go back. But the way I read the news right now is that we should give them at least ammunition. And while we were giving them some ammunition, well, we have to give humanitarian aid, so we're giving humanitarian aids, but we're confiding with the white helmets to make sure that humanitarian aid goes to a certain group. I want to just read a short quote from Jeffries, who's the ambassador, the envoy to Syria.
Yeah.
And this, I think, tells us a lot, because we talk about the military-industrial complex. And here's what Jeffrey said. Turkey is one of the most important counterparts of the U.S. defense industry. Has nothing to do with national defense or budgets or anything else. The industry. And he quotes, and that's what President Trump said, and that we will support Turkey. Well, that tells us that, the hint of a reason to have a little bit of optimism over, what Trump says about trying to come home. And we still concede that he may well want to, but he can't have these two positions. He can't be, in one sense, continue to not offend a NATO ally and be on the side of Turkey and at the same time, confront the Russians and that's what we've pointed out in the past, the ultimate confrontation, and it gets closer and closer because they're shooting down each other's airplanes. And the one thing I feel very confident about, the Russians are not going to just disappear. They're going to be there. We may well, because it makes more sense for us to just back off, but it looks like we have some diehards, neocons putting enough pressure on the president not to take that position.
And the reason why the Pentagon rightly argued against sending them Patriot missiles is because Erdogan, people forget, just a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, he infuriated everyone in Washington because he completed the purchase of Russian S-400s.
Right.
So the idea of having Patriots and S-400s, the Russians who are helping teach them how to use the S-400s would go over there and check out the Patriots and reverse engineer these things and find ways to defeat them, and they would be totally useless. It's a no-brainer. But of course, the neocons who populate the State Department, and you mentioned James Jeffrey, who you remember, he's a hardline neocon from the AIPAC-founded Washington Institute for Near East Policy. But he also has a counterpart, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Kelly Craft. Both of these two officials illegally crossed into Syrian territory yesterday. Craft came with the humanitarian money. Who is Craft? She's a huge Republican donor. She donated to George W. Bush, Rubio, McConnell, Trump. She's the replacement for Nikki Haley. She's just basically Nikki Haley in a different outfit. She said in her confirmation hearing, her top goal at the UN is to fight anti-Israel bias. So anyway, she illegally entered Syria and met with the White Helmets. In fact, she tweeted it out. She's not ashamed of it. She tweeted out, "Grateful to shake the hands of the brave men and women of the White Helmets. These are ordinary people doing extraordinary things to save the lives of Syrian victims of Assad's brutality. American stands with Syria's civil defense." These people are fighting, the White Helmets are fighting alongside with al-Qaeda. There are numerous pictures of, they only operate in territory that is controlled by al-Qaeda. In the very section that Kelly Craft went and she met with rebels in Idlib province, we have a clip of this actually, this is from a year or so ago, another U.S. official told us the kinds of people she's meeting with. Let's listen to it. This is Brett McGurk, who is the U.S. Special Envoy for fighting ISIS.
The largest al-Qaeda safe haven since 9/11, tied directly to Ayman al-Zawahiri. This is a huge problem. It's been a problem for...
So this isn't Ron Paul or Daniel McAdams or anyone else saying it. This is the U.S. official in charge of the fight against ISIS, saying that Idlib is the last bastion of al-Qaeda. And here comes Kelly Craft waltzing in there saying, "You guys are wonderful. You're fantastic. Here, want some money?"
What this is doing is revealing the position that we've held in several areas, and that is the sincerity of doing away with ISIS is not quite there. We've used them frequently. We're on their side when they're doing our bidding, and we're back and forth. But eventually, it has to be ironed out. I see that Merkel is not too happy about this, and she says it's. It's the Turkey's fault. They're the invaders, and they're the aggressors. But she has a domestic concern.
Yeah.
There's a couple of refugees moving in her direction, and of course Europe is in shambles because of that. Because of the Mideastern wars, which we participated or didn't cause a lot of trouble over there. And people get tired of wars, and people who can move, they get out. And then you have that on top of the diplomacy and the militarism. But here they claim that we have to have humanitarian aid. Well, the humanitarian way of helping people is do nothing to precipitate start war and be an aggressor. And when you go 12,000 miles, 8,000 miles, or however away, looking for a fight for somebody, it's hard to say that we're practicing the principles of non-aggression and national defense. It's what Jeffrey said. It's an industry. This has to do with profiteering from warmongering, and it's an industry, and there's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, and here's what Kraft said, this genius at the border while she's talking to al-Qaeda. Humanitarian aid is only a response, but the solution is an immediate ceasefire. The Syrian Arab army is fighting renamed al-Qaeda in the region. The U.S. government itself recognizes this fact. In fact, Joe Biden not long ago gave a speech where he talked about it. And here's this woman saying, here's this U.S. ambassador saying, we need a ceasefire. Can you imagine? We need a ceasefire. Stop fighting al-Qaeda. Stop attacking al-Qaeda. You know, it's insane.
Yeah. So this is not going to be resolved. I don't think there's going to be a ceasefire. I think the real ace in this is probably what Putin does, because he's not going to just disappear. And what I fear most is an accidental or a false flag confrontation, because we're getting awfully close. Our allies are doing one thing, the Russian allies are doing another things. But for the moral high ground, if you can find such a thing, actually Russia's on a higher moral high ground because they've been there. They're allies, and in this, what sort of is astounding. They talk about what they're going to do and what they have to attack and how they're going to do this, and it's always not in Turkey. You know, if the Syrians were in Turkey, you know, a little bit more understandable. But this means we have to, you know, go to Syria to find our fight, and it's a real mess. It's a consequence of too much, too much interventionism by everybody involved.
And you know, we were purposeful when we chose this title, sending it to the Syrian rebels, because we thought some people might take issue with that. No, they're giving the money to the Turks to buy ammunition and everything. No. We've seen this movie before. Every time we give aid to the moderates or to anyone else, we know it ends up in al-Qaeda hands. And, you know, that brings us to James Jeffrey, the U.S. envoy on Syria, who you started the show talking about. He also went up to the border, and he announced that the U.S. is going to send the ammunition, that's the second part of what he said, to the Turkish army, right? So why are you saying it's going to the rebel? Well, the Turkish army is literally fighting side by side, embedded with al-Qaeda. And they say, oh, you're just making this up. Well, how do we know this? Because last week or so, when the Russians and Syrians bombed a convoy of al-Qaeda fighters, oops, they killed 34 Turkish soldiers. That's what precipitated this whole escalation of the past couple of weeks. Hey, you killed 34 of our guys. Well, we were hitting al-Qaeda. Why didn't you tell us that you were in there? And by the way, why are you in there fighting with al-Qaeda? These are questions that we want to know.
You a minute ago pointed out this whole contrast between the Turks getting missiles from Russia and missiles from us, and back and forth. Of course, there's lots of profit involved. But one good thing that might come of all this, Turkey's in the middle of this, and they're wheeling and dealing, and now they're inviting Libya to get involved, or to have a close alliance with Libya. I don't know what that'll lead to. But this thing where Turkey's right in the middle of this, maybe trying to get help on both sides, and who knows what, it might put an end to NATO, because I do not think NATO has ever been a benefit for peace in the world. And it has not been a benefit to America. And I liked what Robert Taft said was being established. It would lead to trouble, and it would have very little to do with just defending a couple countries from Soviet troops invading Eastern Europe. That's a long gone, but people would stir that up and say that. But we may see that, and that should be seen as a positive, not a negative.
Absolutely, that's the silver lining. But you know, this whole thing about, well, this is humanitarian aid. We're going in with humanitarian aid. You know, this is a cover for the Trump administration, or I would say neocons embedded in the Trump administration, to revive the Obama policy of Assad must go. They don't give a hoot about humanitarian situation, because if they did, they would stop for a moment to consider, why is there a humanitarian crisis in Idlib? Why was there one in Aleppo? Why was there one in Ghouta and Douma and etc., Deir ez-Zor? It's because the U.S., its allies, and Turkey decided to arm a bunch of jihadists to overthrow Assad. There weren't people storming out of Syria before this whole thing started. This mess was created by Turkey, and now Turkey's crying, oh, it's just so terrible, there's so many refugees. Well, why did you blow up the country and arm a bunch of jihadists, you know? So it's crocodile tears.
Why couldn't Trump take the position, play a little politics, and said, this is not my war. I didn't start this. This is the Democrats did this, and Obama did this. It's time for Assad to go. Assad has to go. And we've been persisting. Why do we keep defending it? Well, of course, we know why, because neocons are all over the place. They've infiltrated just about every organization, whether it's media or college professors or political parties. There's only a few left. But I think that he could get out of it, but he probably has no motivation to do this, even though he has these secret feelings that, I don't like to see people getting killed, especially if it's going to be a political negative and we're going to see body bags coming back here. I think those days are actually gone. They're always going to lie. They lie to us anyway about that, how many people get killed at wars, and especially they did a lot of hiding during the Vietnam War so that people didn't, know how deadly it was. But I think someday we're going to have to wake up and decide that we need to just stop the war, and we can't. The Republicans aren't blameless. They supported it. They've been financing all this time with Republicans or Democrats in office and financing the money. But if you needed a cover for the Republicans, it should be that this is Obama's war. He decided it's time. Assad has to go, and guess what? Assad is still there, and right now he's probably stronger than he's been in 5 years.
Yeah.
So.
I was on an interview earlier this morning, and someone asked me, well, maybe in Trump's second term, he'll really start doing what he wants to do. Do you think that's possible? And we all kind of agreed. It was kind of a panel. We all agreed that even if he wanted to turn it around, he right now is so surrounded. He's got a guy coming in with his official briefing book, sitting him down and saying, Mr. President, here's what's going on in Syria. That evil Assad is killing people at random just for fun. He can, even if he wanted to, he's surrounded by people who are lying to him constantly, and there's hardly any way, it's hardly any hope, And what we could point out is, what about the places that were liberated by Assad? Did he, after he liberated these places, just go in and, like Al Pacino in Scarface and blow everyone away? No. People actually swarmed back into Aleppo after the Syrian government took it. That doesn't mean we love the Syrian government. It's none of our business. But we do know that there was a long line of people actually going back, not going out once you kick out the terrorists.
Some people would like to get an excuse to Trump, because practically, and there may be a little bit of truth to this, that if you go overboard against the establishment, the deep state, your life can be jeopardized. Yeah. And the saying is, well, he has to, stay alive. He's the kind of person that shouldn't be intimidated. So there's this discrepancy about that. Trump isn't the kind that's is intimidated easily and backs off. So I tend to think that he has a confused vision of foreign policy, and he can pride himself on being an astute politician, how to rally people who are unhappy with some of the social changes in this country and play on that. But on foreign policy, it's sort of a pragmatic thing that might benefit him today and not tomorrow. But I don't believe that the only reason he goes along with the neocons is he's intimidated, but some people make that case, and there may be a little bit of that. But unfortunately, that vacillation back and forth and flip-flopping, I think it's going to continue, because he doesn't have a precise principle that he's dealing with, And he's the same way on monetary policy too, except he's very determined there, because he knows exactly what he wants, and it contradicts everything market-wise possible. And people say, well, it's been going great, yeah, up until now.
Exactly. Well, I would just close by saying if there's ever a time for the U.S. to step back, it's now. Erdogan is on a tear. He purposely misinterpreted the Sochi agreement to allow him to take a big chunk of Syria for his own. That is not what the Russians or Syrian government had in mind at all. It's all coming to a head. The neocons want to use this to revive their pipe dream of overthrowing the Syrian government on the way to Tehran. If there's ever a time for us to back away, it's between when Russia and Turkey start going toe-to-toe. Why would we want to be in the middle of that? What's in it for us?
Very good. And we're nearing that time where the recognition of the total failure of our foreign policy will be observed by most people in the world, because I think it is failing. This impasse that we have here, whether it's Afghanistan 20 years and whether it's Syria and now Libya going on, it continues. But the thing of it is, this coincides with some real serious things going on in the stock market and the financial markets. And it's almost like a blessing for some of them. The whole reason why we're having financial problems and interest rates want to go up and the repo market is seizing, it's because of the virus. It's because of coronavirus, and that's the reason. No, they can't get away with it. There's something seriously wrong with the financial and economic system that we have, based on endless spending, endless debt, endless malinvestment, zero rate interest, and that has a problem with building up tremendous imbalances, and they're called bubbles. And of course, that's what's happening. It's who's going to get blamed, and right now it's going to be the virus. Blame the virus. We need more people quarantined. Maybe that'll do the trick. But I think it's coming unglued when the financial system, in many ways, everybody wants to and will relate it to the coronavirus, as well as this foreign policy. But the foreign policy is not doing well, and they're at an impasse. So we have one pitch. There's an answer to this. It's not confusing. It's pro-American, it's pro-constitutional, it's pro-morality, and it's pro-peace, and it's pro-prosperity. It means just mind our own business, don't commit any acts of aggression against anybody, and bring our troops home, because we don't know what's best for these other countries, and it ends up making a mess of things. Besides, all that foreign policy contributes to the financial problem, and that is not difficult. Matter of fact, everybody gets richer, really. The people of this country, instead of spending, like in the last 10 years or so, $6-7 trillion, well, where would that money be if we didn't blow it up in bombs and things? It would be back in the pockets of the American people, and in our country would be richer and safer, and less people living on the streets. So I don't know why people reject this. I blame our group of people who believe in this as being not good presenters to this, because it's such an easy answer. It's such a wonderful answer, defending peace and prosperity by recognizing that we just don't commit these kind of silly things. And yet we don't do a good job in selling our position. So we have to take the blame, and we have to take the challenge that we need a better way to convince the people that they're better off with a system that is designed to protect individual liberty, rather than saying, well, what we need is free stuff for everyone. Well, that won't work. The sooner we discover that and the people realize that, the sooner they will come back to at least a token support for the principles of liberty. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.